Right guys, a little bit of a change of format today. Today I will be walking through a portion of Grand Targhee National Forest. Beautiful part of this wonderful state that I've just moved to. Now, I will be reading you one of my favorite stories and it will be overlaid over the video. Let me know if you like this format, but in the meantime guys, just enjoy. This is a classic from 4chan's K-Board. It was uploaded April 22nd, 2013, and is one of the older yet very intriguing stories from the board. So let's get into it. It takes place in Nevada. I've only shared this one with a few people, and still when I think about it, it freaks me out. I was 16 or so, and growing up in a small town exploring out in the hills was the only thing to do. This incident took place at the north end of Ruby Valley in Elko County, Nevada. Someday I will play around on Google Earth to try and find this place, but it is slightly north of the road off Highway 93 that goes into Ruby Valley. I always like checking old mine shafts and ghost towns. This stuff has always intrigued me. At the Burger Bar in Wells, Nevada, where I am from and grew up, they had these old turn-of-the-century maps under glass on the tables. On one of them, it showed several ghost towns just north of Ruby Valley, so I figured I would go check them out, as I had not been in the area very often. I gassed up my 72 Dodge W200 pickup, and being a redneck in K, before 4chan even, I grabbed my HK91 and set out. I had found some old foundations in the lower country and started heading into the mountains themselves and started finding abandoned mine shafts. The stuff was pretty cool, so I kept going up. I took this ancient road that was no more than an overgrown cattle path by this point in history and came upon a tree blocking the road. It was an old pine tree about 2 feet in diameter that blocked the road. After the tree, the road continued straight for about 200 yards, then hooked right before coming back 180 degrees. Continuing, I'm going to sketch up some of the key locations for the next post. I parked my truck in front of the tree and set out on foot. I grabbed my HK91 with a 20-round mag in the rifle and put another 20-round mag in my back left pocket. I always had a rifle with me as I had encountered mountain lions and mine shafts before, and just generally I like to shoot. Get up on the ridge lines and shoot boulders from a couple hundred yards away. Anyways, as soon as I had climbed over the fallen tree, I had a really creepy feeling, as if I was being watched. I continued on for about 200 yards to the point where the road started curving right and gaining elevation, going towards the cabin. At this point, I had the realization that not only did I feel like I was being watched, it was also dead quiet. This was June or so, and as school had just gotten out. Everywhere you went, you could hear those stupid cicadas, but not here. It seemed as soon as I crossed the fallen tree, the mountains were silent. No bugs, no birds, nothing. Deafening silence. As I came up to the turn, there was a big rock. The thing had to be about 15 feet in diameter, and you could tell that it used to be on the road, but due to years of erosion, snow, and all that, it had slid down just slightly off the road. It seemed to be red limestone or something like that. It stood out since they are not that common in the area. I looked at the rock, and you could tell that there were carvings in it at some point in time, but due to weathering, whatever was carved on it had to have been worn off. I kept walking up the road being creeped out, but I really wanted to check out the old cabin, as it was pretty obvious no one had been there in quite a while. At this point, I was probably 3 hours off road to get to this point. I got up to the cabin, and as far as abandoned houses and cabins in Nevada go, this one was in pretty good shape. All of the glass on the windows was still intact, and there were remnants of curtains behind said windows. By this point, there was something in the back of my mind telling me that I should be going. I went in the cabin, and that is where I started to get this feeling that something was completely off. Most cabins you find out in the middle of nowhere are barren, nothing really left, maybe just a bit of broken furniture. This one, however, was completely furnished. Time had taken its toll, of course, but everything was still there. What was left of an old mattress and bedding was still there. There were plates and other cookware throughout the house, along with tattered clothing and personal effects such as chest, faded pictures, and the like. What really creeped me out was the dinner table. It was set for 4 people, dinner plate, glasses, and silverware. This was the first cabin I had ever found that was in such a condition. It was as if whoever resided here had just up and left everything behind. I felt like I should not be in this cabin, and went outside to see if I could find the mine shaft or anything else. Once I was out the door, I decided to chamber around on my HK91. The sound of me racking around in echoed throughout the whole canyon and broke the silence. As little of a thing as it was, this calmed my nerves very slightly.
Directly behind the cabin was a well. It was still intact, and as I got closer, it sounded like there was noise coming from it, like a slight breeze rustled through it. When I got within about 50 feet of it, I started to smell something. It smelled absolutely putrid. Definitely something died in that well. The smell of decay was heavy in the air, with an arid copper smell that tore at my nostrils. I did not want to get any closer to the well and started walking toward the left where I could see the opening to a mine shaft up upon the hill. The closer I got to it, I could start feeling a breeze coming out of it. This is not really that uncommon if you have explored mine shafts before, as the breeze could be coming in from another opening from the mine. But there was a few weird things. The first is that it was perfectly calm. As far as I could see, there were no trees moving or any signs of wind. As I got closer, another thing that struck me was odd was that the breeze that was coming out of the shaft was hot. Most of the time, the breeze is cool, as most mine shafts maintain a constant temperature. The closer I got to the shaft, the slower I moved towards it. Nothing since I crossed the fallen tree seemed right. The closer I got to the opening of the mine shaft, the more of a feeling of dread and being watched I got. I got within about 15 feet of the shaft when the smell hit me like a train. It was the smell of decay and copper, but much stronger than at the well. Right then, all of my spidey senses started going off. I had to get out of there. I started turning left to book it out of there when I saw a dark shadow moving in the opening of the mine shaft. Whatever it was appeared to be crouched down to physically fit in the mine shaft. Keep in mind, most mine shafts have an 8 to 10 foot tall ceiling. At first I thought it was a mountain lion. Then I remembered how big mining shafts were. My mind raced to try and figure out what it was. It was way too big to be a black bear, which are super rare in Nevada anyway. I nearly froze with panic, and it slowly kept coming towards the opening of the shaft. It was probably within 10 feet of the opening, and then the light started to show whatever it was, and it was covered from head to toe in grayish-brown fur. Then it screamed. It was unlike anything I had ever heard in my whole life. My ears were ringing from it. I flipped into panic mode and did what any good redneck would do. I shot it. I pulled up my HK-91, placed the front sight blade on what appeared to be center mass, and ripped off 5 rounds as fast as I could accurately shoot. If you ever shot big game with a large caliber rifle, you know the sound when you connect with something. I had 4 solid thwunks and 1 round that went too high. This made it scream even louder than it had, in pain. At this time I started hearing more separate screams coming from all over the well and in the hills above the mine shaft. I started running down the hill as fast as I could. In the tree line above the road, approximately 125 yards, I could see very fast movement. Rocks were tumbling down the hill, and there were several other screams. From the mine shaft, I could hear the wailing of whatever it was that I just shot. Whatever it was, I had definitely connected, and it was hurting. Whatever it was up in the tree line, they were running from tree to tree on all fours, getting closer to me. As I ran toward the rock, I was shooting in the general vicinity of the movement on top of the hill. By the time I had gotten to the limestone rock, I had expended all 20 rounds in the rifle. I ripped it out and put in the spare mag, chambering around, and started sprinting towards the fallen tree, approximately 200 yards away by now. I kept glancing back, and whatever they were staying in the trees. I could make out their masses and fur, but they would not stay in the open. I got back to the fallen tree and ate it trying to jump over. I got up, fired between 12 and 50 rounds at the closest movement, which was approximately 50 yards away from now. I had heard a few rounds connect, and it started screaming louder. Between the screaming and my gunshots, my ears were horrible. I opened the door of my truck, got in, and started it up as fast as I could. Backing up to turn around, I almost put my truck in the canyon. As I started going forward to leave on the road, that's when I finally got a good look at one of them. It was crouched over with its front feet on the tree. It was covered from head to toe in grayish-brown fur, with long, slender fingers with claws tipping off the fingers. The back of it was hunched, the face slender, most closely resembling that of a badger, but with sunken-in eyes. It was shaking its head back and forth, and it sounded like it was trying to speak, but it was so garbled. And with the noise of my truck, I could not make out anything of what it was trying to say. I averaged 50 to 60 mph on that crappy dirt road that I had done 15 mph on the way in. I did not stop, and I did not slow down until I made it back to the pavement. By now I was so shaken I had to stop and collect myself. I got back to town and I was still in shock. My dad had been a guide in the Ruby Mountains for about 20 years. He asked me how my trip went and where I went. He could tell that I was startled and asked where I had been. I told him that I had been north of Ruby Valley. He got quiet and asked if I had seen a cabin with a tree fallen over the road. I told him, yeah. He looked me in the eyes and told me that is somewhere I should never go again, especially alone. We never spoke about it again after that. I have never been back there, which is part of the reason I live in Western Nevada now. But in the back of my mind, there is something that is telling me I should go back. And one day I will go back. This was back in 2001, before phones had cameras, and I was too broke to afford a digital camera. I want to go back with the camera, preferably a GoPro on my helmet, and with several friends that are well armed. Just something about there, even with what I experienced, is drawing me back. One day I will go back. I guess I'd need closure on what happened that day. I'll probably be on for another 30 minutes or so if anyone has questions. After that, I can be reached by email. Stand by, I will sketch up a drawing. My drawing skills are awful, so it'll be rough. All right, this is SchizoSaint here. I must say, this drawing is pretty impressive for an Anon on an image board. Not bad. All right, back to the thread. All right, the rest of this thread is him responding to people, and so I do not have the post that he responded to, but I will be reading his responses to the post because they're actually pretty interesting. He responded to one Anon, definitely want to make it back there with at least 4 to 5 people well armed, that's for sure. Still to this day, it gives me goosebumps thinking about this stuff. I tried researching it a few years back, asking some old timers, and one of them even told me a story about the Rubies. I will be quick. During the 40s and 50s, the Army Air Corps operated out of the Wendover Air Base. Every now and then during awful weather, a B-25, B-17, or B-29 would smack the Rubies due to poor visibility. That's kind of sad. Some of the local ranchers got recruited to help the military go up to a crash site during the winter to recover bodies. A rancher I was talking to told me that it took them about 3 days to get up to where this crash was on horseback and recover the bodies. He said when they got to the wreckage, all of the crew members were laid out side by side next to each other in clearing the wreckage. Many of them had severed limbs, and it was apparent all died on impact, but somehow they ended up all laid out next to each other. This was nearly at 10,000 elevation, too. All right, guys, that's the end of the thread. That's all that's left of it. Very interesting story. Part of what makes this thread so believable is just the sheer amount of detail that is in the story. Now, as always, that is also a great way to fake a story, right? The more details you add, the better. And especially if you're typing it out and you have time to really think it out, there is a good argument that this is a fake story. But I do believe he actually did go to the Ruby Mountains with his HK-91. That I don't doubt. The question is did he actually encounter some crazy giant badgers? That I'm a little more skeptical of. I'll tell you what, though, if I ever, for whatever reason, end up in the horrible state of Nevada, I will absolutely grab some of my buddies from the Discord and we will go check it out and see what's going on, because this seems like a great place to go. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the new format. I didn't really find anything that interesting while wandering around the woods of Idaho, but hopefully I will soon. So anyway, guys, that's all for the thread. Thanks, guys, for watching. I hope you enjoyed the new format. It is a whole new world out here, and I will definitely be returning to places much like this one. Unfortunately, on my expedition today, I did not find anything too scary, but I did have a peaceful, serene, good time. So anyway, guys, have a good day, and stay tuned for the next one.